What is going on, Panthers fans? This is Mike Kaye, Panthers beat reporter, and I'm joined by Alex Zietlow, the scarecrow of your land of Oz. If you were a Panthers fan, he'd be the guy you'd miss the most. Anyway, we're having a little difficulty, so hopefully Alex doesn't freeze up too much. But we do know that he has a brain. So, Alex, fans of the Panthers, welcome to another episode of the riveting podcast known as Processing Blue. We're coming off a bye week, so you can feel some of that bye week energy. The vibes are high. The Panthers are coming off a 2-game winning streak. I told Alex that the Panthers would beat the Giants. It didn't go down exactly how I thought it would go, but Alex was wrong, and I was right, and that's all that really matters at the Processing Blue podcast. With that said, young Alex, how are you doing?
Old Mike, I'm doing great.
That's not patchiness, that's gray. Well, I'm glad to hear that, Alex, because we finally got to see each other for the first time in person in what feels like forever.
Wasn't it wonderful?
It was lovely, I'll be honest. You know, as everyone knows, our budding friendship is the reason to tune in. We're like the goofy, nerdier version, PG version of Wolverine and Deadpool, or Deadpool and Wolverine, I guess. I watched that for the second time this weekend, and some of the jokes hit. Some of them were kind of, man, I laughed at that before. Anyway, with that said, let's jump into it like a running back hitting the hole behind the Panthers' offensive line, namely Chuba Hubbard. But that's not who we're going to talk about right now. Let's talk about Jonathan Brooks, who is likely to make his debut against the Chiefs in Week 12 at Bank of America Stadium in a black helmet with a fully reconstructed knee. Alex, what's your expectations for, as Dave Canales called him, JB?
Firstly, Dave Canales says, quote, he fully expects for Brooks to make his debut this weekend. I asked Dave specifically if he expects to have Jonathan on a pitch count, so to speak, or a snap count. And he said they're, quote, not really looking for a specific number, unquote. He went on to say that when you get a guy ready Sunday, the confidence should be that he can go out and just play a normal football game. We saw that when DJ Wanham made his when he made his Panthers debut in Germany. We saw the same thing with Jordan Fuller, other guys coming off of IR. I don't expect there to be a pitch count per se. Now, do I expect him to get a lot of touches? Well, I think it's fair to say that Jonathan will kind of be moving into this Miles Sanders sort of role. And so Sanders was pretty much exclusively playing third down. He was exclusively a third down back, essentially, by the end of his time. And if you guys are a fantasy football guy and you're expecting Jonathan Brooks to get double-digit touches, I'm glad you came to this podcast so we can tell you, no, that's probably not going to happen. This is Chuba Hubbard's backfield. In many ways, this is Chuba Hubbard's offense. And if Brooks is going to make his debut and is going to be an important part of this offense, it'll be in a role. I imagine he's going to get anywhere between 3 to 5 carries, maybe 3 to 7 carries, but not much more than that. Mike, what do you think?
Well, so you're focused on the carries, which I totally am with. But I think where he's going to separate himself early is as a receiver and as a decoy. They've been trying to establish this 21 personnel package. I do expect to see Brooks and Chuba Hubbard on the field at the same time. I do expect the draw of the running game to then expose the tackle box to maybe get Brooks some opportunities as a receiver. You know, you brought up the runs by Miles Sanders, but entering last week, where his game was cut short at halftime, he was Miles Sanders was averaging 19 snaps and 6 touches per game. So that's including runs and catches. I kind of expect that for Jonathan Brooks the first couple of weeks in this offense. I don't think he he's going to be particularly like an overarching asset. But I do think the Panthers are in a place where they don't need him to be this like explosive threat out of the backfield constantly. I made mention of this a couple of days ago when the Eagles played on Thursday Night Football. They used Kenny Gainwell as kind of like a hurry up offense sort of weapon. And I think that's a really good way to introduce Brooks to the contact of the NFL, the speed of the NFL. All right, so we talked a little bit about running back. Obviously, Jonathan Brooks is going to be a popular topic of discussion throughout the week. We'll have all your updates on charlotteobserver.com as to whether he'll play, what his role will be, etc. throughout the week. But moving on, Dave Canales made the decision to go with Bryce Young out of the bye week. The Panthers are coming off a 2-game winning streak. Frankly, there was no choice. I'm sorry. Like, all roads led to a 5'10", 204-pound quarterback. That is a fact. That is what it is. And let me tell you why.
Please do, Mike.
If the Panthers would have zigged when everybody was expecting them to zag, and then they still got colossally beat by the Chiefs, there would be a sense of, what are we doing here, right? The whole point of starting a veteran quarterback is to win. That's to give you your best opportunity. And if you're still getting manhandled, you've not only hurt the confidence of the young quarterback, but potentially the folks around him. Starting Andy Dalton was almost a no-win proposition for them. I do not think that, spoiler alert, I do not think that the Chiefs are going to lose to the Panthers this weekend. I don't think Alex does. I don't think anyone in the country really thinks that, especially coming off a loss to the Bills, where they're going to be very mad. That said, listen, both guys have played 5 games. One of those guys has won 2 of the 5 games. One of them has won 1. And while it was unfair the way that Andy Dalton lost his job, the reality of the situation is this is a rebuilding team that is trying to scrape together wins and trying to scrape together value from their assets. And Bryce Young, like whether you believe in him or not, is an asset. And it is imperative that he either ups his stock internally or externally. And the only way to really impact that evaluation process is to allow him to play, especially against good teams. Really, there's nothing to lose by playing Bryce Young. If you get smacked 34-7 by the Chiefs, guess what? Everyone thought that was what was going to happen. If Bryce Young goes out, lives up to his pedigree, puts 24 points on the board, and leads 4 scoring drives, or what have you, that's a win. That leads to drawing in the hubris of another GM. That leads into drawing in the hubris of another head coach. That does lead scouts to believe that they might have been correct, and maybe it was the situation that affected Bryce Young. To me, the more concerning thing as we get through this, and look, it's we want to preach honesty, right, with our subjects always. Dave Canales refuses to be like, yeah, Bryce is the guy, which to me is puzzling because he's been willing to contradict himself in other aspects pretty regularly, say things or use things for gamesmanship over the last 10 weeks, or even back to training camp. And yet he still will not take the bite of the Bryce apple. It's just not something he's doing. Now, I don't know if that's strategic motivation. I don't know if that's because he wants to keep Andy Dalton, at arm's length. It is a rough situation. It is an unusual situation to lose your job over a minor car accident, for sure. But a few things need to be said. Andy Dalton signed here knowing that he was going to be at least a bridge or backup quarterback to a young quarterback. He also has a relationship with Bryce Young that outdates what Dave Canales has with him and Bryce Young. He also led the team to a 4-game losing streak before he was benched, unceremoniously. I think that those need to be looked at. I also think it needs to be looked at that he had 6 interceptions in his final 4 games. Bryce Young has looked low bar, but consequentially better than he did in his first 2 games when he was benched. There has been growth there. Whether it's been substantial or not, who knows? But I think like everything tells you Bryce Young should be starting. Am I off base at all here, Alex?
No, I think you're completely on. I think you're completely uh, correct in all that. I mean, Mike, on Monday when we were walking out to practice, you and me were just talking. We're just like, is there any possibility that he names Andy the starter? Like what? And if he does, what could his rationale possibly be? And we ultimately came to the conclusion that there's, like you said at the top of your spiel there, there's just no other choice for them to put Bryce out there and to start. I will say though, um, I do want to. This isn't just a free pass for Bryce Young. This game, I don't. I don't think it's. I don't think it's fan. I don't think it's fair for fans to go out there and say, okay, well, no matter what Bryce Young does, because they're the Kansas City Chiefs, he's gonna be exempt from any and all criticism. Yes, the Chiefs have a fantastic defense this year, but I don't think that. I think the progress still needs to show, and some ways that he could show some progress if we can move on to this segment. What do we want to see from Bryce in this game? For me, it all comes down to some second half production. That would be nice. Once we've seen this several times this season. Once he and Canales are out of their 15 to 20 play script that they begin all their games with, he looks productive in those first 15 to 20 plays, and then he has a huge drop off afterward. You've seen it in the Broncos game. You've seen it in pretty much every game outside of the first 2 weeks where Bryce started and had a really terrible start to his sophomore season. Can he push the ball down the field? Can he be productive? Some funny stats, or not funny, some interesting stats that I came across in trying to substantiate my point that I'm making. And the NFL has crazy split stats that you can really parse through. On attempts 1 through 10 for Bryce Young, so at the beginning of the game, he's a combined 42 for 59 for 307 passing yards. That's a 71.2 completion percentage. He has 3 touchdowns in that and 2 interceptions in that, which you might be saying, okay, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, that's not great. Well, compared to the rest of Bryce Young's split, they're fantastic. On attempts 11 through 20, he's 27 for 50, which brings him down to a 54% completion percentage for 3 interceptions and no touchdowns. And then on attempts 21 through 30, and the few times that he has thrown the ball over 21 times this year, he's 18 of 37, 48.6% completion percentage, and he has 172 yards and 1 interception, no touchdowns. So that just goes to kind of illustrate that the further that Bryce Young goes in these games, the worse that he's been, at least statistically. You can make the argument, okay, against the Giants, he managed the game in the second half with aplomb. He had a really important pass to David Moore in the red zone, which extended a drive, which got Chuba Hubbard a touchdown. And that ultimately set up the game to go into overtime and ultimately set up. You can make these arguments, and I know that you will, Mike, because you are an analyzer and an analyst after my own heart. But, like, I don't think that these stats are deniable. I think it's undeniable that Bryce is really good at the start of these games, and then he has trouble adjusting. Against one of the best teams in the NFL, I wonder how that'll impact his game. And so, to rack this up, I want Bryce to look better in the second half against these Chiefs. And whether that's relative to how he normally is, that's what I want to see. Mike, do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, those stats to me tell me a couple of things. Okay, one, there are creative people that if you give them a prompt or you give them an idea, they can take the ball and run with it. Similarly, in coaching, it sounds like Bryce is very receptive to coaching in practice and planning throughout the week because he is a very smart player. And it sounds like the coaching is hitting him. And so I think when you have that staged or practiced 15 to 20 plays, it allows him to start quickly, right? I think the issue is, like the SAT, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff you study for, and then you don't know what the prompt is. And then once the prompt, like, look, I studied this, I studied this. And then when you're asked to creatively write and you don't have that prompt, you have to think outside the box. And that's where I think that Bryce kind of struggles based on those statistics. As you know, I'm big on body language and I'm big on messaging. And I do think there's a disconnect in how Bryce and Canales operate, just from the outside looking in. Dave is very positive about a lot of things and shows a lot of conviction. The one thing he has not shown conviction in is what?
Is his, belief in Bryce Young. Is if Bryce Young's going to be the guy.
Correct. And look, that could be for a multitude of different reasons, right? Like the only people that truly know are in that building. And I think that plays into the uneasiness of, hey, I've got to prove myself. Hey, I've got to step outside the comfort zone. Do I truly have the backing of the people that are looking over the playbook? And I think anyone in that circumstance would try to play some hero ball. I think they'd be prone to mistakes. And I think that it's really interesting to watch this dynamic between this quarterback and his head coach, where they're both kind of learning on the job, right? Like neither one of them is particularly proven. Neither one of them is particularly established within the eyes of the fan base, within the eyes of commentators, etc. And where I'm getting with this is the dynamic needs to shift at some point. And I don't know if there's enough time for it to shift. I don't know what it's going to take for it to shift. Regardless of what anybody says, I think it's very clear that these are two different viewpoints that don't completely align. And so I think you're seeing that on the field as well. I did think it's interesting not to go get away from Bryce, but I did think it was interesting that Dave kind of left stuff open for Brady Christensen to potentially not start this game at center. Kaye Mays played very well, but the old adage is you want your top 5 players on the field. And frankly, Brady Christensen, if there was another guy that you'd want to pay right now internally, it's Brady Christensen. So the threat of potentially not playing him is worrisome, in my opinion. I think that sends kind of a weird message in a lot of ways. Kaye Mays was on a practice squad somewhere else a little over a month ago. And Brady Christensen's been a good soldier and basically played very, very well at both center and left tackle, arguably better than the two guys he replaced at those positions.
Ooh, hot take. All right.
And so I'm interested to see kind of what happens here. But that's enough about offense. Let's get on to the defense. So the final 7 games are coming down the pike. Really, Philly and Kansas City are the two offenses that look to be scary, especially from a run game perspective for this Panthers team. I think the rest of the slate is quote unquote winnable. I had them going 6-11. I think you had them as what, 7 and 10?
No, the other way.
Oh, sorry, 5-12. I'm gonna say this: in my mind, I don't see where they win less than 5 games this season. I think the Bucs, they can split at worst. They're really banged up. I think Dallas is an absolute dumpster fire. Those poor Yankees fans are going to show up at Bank of America Stadium, and it's going to be a tough couple of months for them, in my opinion. Like, at least there's the Lakers, right? At least there's the Lakers, right? Like, the Lakers are around. So what I would say is, but here's the thing. I think that Canales needs a signature win, and right now, low bar, his signature win is Munich. I think if they can beat the Cardinals at home or play spoiler to the Falcons in the finale, that's a signature win for him. I think if they finish with 6 wins, they are tripling what they did last year. And by the way, they're surpassing anything that Matt Rule did in a single season. And I think that that is a very good thing to hang your hat on if you're David Tepper, if you're Dan Morgan, if you're Dave Canales, or as I call them, the Triple D. I think, uh,
Cool.
because there's D's in all their first names.
I got it, bro. Yep.
I think that that's something to look forward to. But I think a lot of this weighs in on the defense and Ejiro Avero's group. They've kind of put it together the last couple of weeks. They've given up some yardage, but they have held opposing teams to 39 points over the span as opposed to giving up around 36 to 39 points per game. And I think that's a step in the right direction. What are you looking for in these final 7 games to see if the defense can kind of get the most juice out of the squeeze?
Yeah, I am looking for continued progression on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, let's not like make this. Let's not overblow the defense's accomplishments the last couple weeks.
Sure.
Yes, they did bend don't break kind of magic against the Giants. They had 2 red zone interceptions. They had the fumble at the beginning of overtime that really paved the way for the Panthers win. The Saints had against the Saints the week before the Giants game. They didn't come up with as many turnover or as many takeaways, but the Saints were just like, I didn't understand the play calling at all. Alvin Kamara had 93 rushing yards through the first half. He was getting 7 to 8 yards a carry on those first couple of drives, and then they just insisted on throwing the ball on third down. And I was like, what are you guys doing? So I think this defense has shown improvement, but some of that improvement has been paved by either quarterbacking mistakes or by play calling, gaffes, for lack of a better term. I will say that the defense is looking better. If you ask the spiritual leader of that defense, J.C. Horn, what he thinks the personality of the defense is, he says, we're still trying to figure it out. We're still trying to find our personality. I mean, the past couple of games, we've been running around, talking smack, hitting, being hard hitters and these sorts of things. But in his answer, we learn, hey, this defense is still finding its footing. It's still trying to figure out who they are after Shaq Thompson is gone. Still trying to figure out who they are after Derek Brown went down for the season after week 1. Are those good excuses at this point in the year? No, because Derek Brown went down in week 1, but they're still trying to find their identity. And so I think, what can we expect? What do I want to see from this Panthers defense over the final 7 games? Is to just figure out who they are. Are they good against the run? Are they good against the pass? Can they find ways to make takeaways at the end of these games? Can they beat bad offenses and then get blown out by good offense? I mean, who are these guys? I think at the end of the day, that is what I want to see from this defense. And then my final point, on an individual basis, I just want to see Trevin Wallace continue to fly. He has been, last week I said he's been the rookie of the midway point. I still think that he's I think the 3rd leader in tackles on this team, and he didn't play any defensive snaps essentially those first 2 or 3 weeks. So I want to see Trevin Wallace get better, but I also want to see the defense find its personality. Will they find its personality against these Chiefs? Probably not. Not with Mahomes magic, not with the playmakers that Kansas City has on the offensive side of the ball. But like you said, somehow the back half of the schedule got interesting for the Panthers. We at the beginning of the year, we thought that this back half of the schedule was going to be the demise. They were going to have to get all their wins before the bye. Now all of a sudden, like the NFL does, things change. What do you want to see from this defense?
Competence. I already know they're not a good run defense. Nothing's going to change that this year. I'd like to see DJ Wanham continue to show that he was the right signing. I think I called the win over the Giants the Dan Morgan offseason game, where it was they brought in all these guys that had connections to Evero along with Clowney, and then Wanham and Dane Jackson, and I thought everybody kind of delivered in one way or another. Continue to build on that. Continue to create turnovers, because that's the thing. This team's going to have to create turnovers to win games. They are not good enough at tackling. They're not good. Good enough at stopping the run. They're kind of up and down in pass coverage when it's not J.C. Horn. And so turnovers are going to be the name of the game, and that's kind of where they're at. But as you know, the Chiefs don't really turn the ball over a lot, and they score a lot of points. And for perspective on that, you interviewed an expert on that team. Take it from here, Alex.
Yes, I did interview Blair Kerkhoff of the Kansas City Star to get a good, solid preview of this Kansas City Chiefs Carolina Panthers game on Sunday in Bank of America Stadium. Check it out. All right, and now we welcome in Blair Kerkhoff of the Kansas City Star to preview the big game on Sunday, or the biggest game Bank of America Stadium has seen in a while, when the Chiefs visit the Panthers. Blair covers the Kansas City Chiefs like a blanket, as do the rest of his colleagues over at the Star. Blair, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alex. Great talking little Carolina Panthers, Kansas City Chiefs this weekend. Looking forward to it.
Yes. And offline, we talked some North Carolina sports as well beyond the Panthers. But yes, we're talking about the Panthers Chiefs this week. I wanted to start with what the average Panthers fan probably thinks of the Chiefs this year, and then have you either affirm it or reject it, or inject some nuance in it. So I think this is what I think the casual fans' perception is of the Chiefs this year. Kansas City is really good, but not as good as their 9-1 record reflects. Patrick Mahomes can muster magic at the end of games, but largely he struggled. Same thing goes for his tight end, Travis Kelce. The defense is stingy, but can be exploited by a good pass game. So I guess my question to you is, are any of these perceptions unfair? And if so, where do you think it's necessary to put in some nuance to paint a fuller and more fair picture of this Kansas City Chiefs team this year?
None of those are unfair. They're all accurate. It's not a, I think there's a national perception of the Chiefs being this just unbeatable team, and because of what they've been for the last several years, it's like it's the way that people maybe think about the Patriots in their glory years. Now, like it was never any flaws. It was always a shock when they lost, and people don't remember that the Patriots didn't win the Super Bowl every year. I mean, Brady played for 22 years. He won 7 Super Bowls, which is an incredible accomplishment. Mahomes and Kelce and Andy Reid, they've all been together since, Mahomes' first year was 2017. So 2018, he became the starter. And this is the 6th year as a starter. They won 3 Super Bowls, appeared in 4. So the standard of the Chiefs is higher than any team in the NFL. It's easy to see when they have flaws, like they did Sunday in the loss at Buffalo, the first loss of the season. I still think it's an outstanding team. I don't think I would power rate them number 1 in the NFL. I think I'd give that to the Lions and maybe put the Bills ahead of the Chiefs right now. But I don't know. There's just something about the drive and the motivation of this team that when it's all said and done, I wouldn't be shocked if they were playing in the Super Bowl once again. Now, this was not a great team last year. They finished 11-6. They lost to the Raiders on Christmas Day. They were kind of in a crisis mode. And then they win, a couple of regular season games, 4 playoff games, including the Super Bowl for the 2nd straight year. So it's a different standard by which we judge the Chiefs.
And I think it's a different standard in large part, and again, going back to this casual fan's perspective, because we hear all the time how amazing Patrick Mahomes is. And that is certainly deserving based on how prolific and how great he's been his first 6 seasons in the league. You've covered him all 6 years that he's been in Kansas City and a whole bunch of years prior to Patrick Mahomes coming to the Chiefs. I'm curious, does this year feel any different than in years past? And I know Patrick Mahomes' standard is super high, kind of similarly to the Chiefs now. But does this year feel any different when it comes to when you're watching Patrick Mahomes? Are there any ways that he's perhaps been better?
It does feel a little bit different, and the numbers reflect that, right? He had interceptions in his first 7 games of the year. He went 2 games without one, and then he had 2 picks on Sunday up in Buffalo. It hasn't been from a quarterback rating standpoint, or just numbers, touchdown passes down, interceptions up, completion percentage is about the same. Yard per attempt way down. Keep in mind, this is it's an entirely different Chiefs wide receiving core than what they expected to have when the year started. Look, they had Rashee Rice, who was their top wide receiver as a rookie last year. He's injured in a Week 3 game at the Chargers. Hollywood Brown, their biggest offseason acquisition, is lost for the season on the first preseason snap of the year for the Chiefs. So two players they were expecting to be wide receivers 1 and 2 in their offense, not available to them during the regular season. The Chiefs' idea, and by drafting Xavier Worthy with their first-round pick, they were going to reintroduce some speed into their wide receiving core. They didn't have that a year ago. Didn't prevent them from winning the Super Bowl, but they wanted to add speed to their wide receiving core. And basically all that's left of that plan is Xavier Worthy, and they're having a difficult time trying to get him the ball deep. So it is different that way, and the Chiefs have had to adjust. It says something about the team, the coaching staff, and just the will of the players that while they're making this adjustment, they're 9-1.
Absolutely. And a big reason why the offense is able to figure things out is because the defense has been so good. I mean, this defense is remarkable. I read all y'all's work at the Kansas City Star, and a lot of it is these aren't the Patrick Mahomes Chiefs anymore. Here's how they're different, and then it starts on the defensive side of the ball. So I think most people know that Chris Jones is a beast. He's remarkable holding it down on the defensive line. In your opinion, who's the most impactful player on the Chiefs not named Chris Jones?
Well, you're right about Chris. It takes 2 to keep him out of the backfield. He's been terrific. I think he's not. I don't think you could say a defensive player of the year level, but I think it is definitely an all-pro level for him this year. After that, you've got a cast of players who are really good and have played very well together in Steve Spagnuolo's defense, which I think Spags is a master as defensive coordinator. One guy who's been pretty interesting this year, and he's for his consistency, and then in his big playability, which we'll talk about in a second, is linebacker Leo Chenal. He is, linebacker. Say what you will about the position and its influence on the field, but this is a guy they'll line up at end. They'll drop him back in coverage. He is absolutely a jack of all trades, defensive player for the Chiefs. And it was Chenal who got his hand on the Broncos' 35-yard field goal attempt on the final play of the game a couple of weeks ago that allowed him to make the block and the Chiefs to preserve the victory that made him 9-0. He has become just a guy who very dependable and a fan favorite. He's a solid guy. It's not that the Chiefs are not without flaws on defense. They do. Their second cornerback position is a little shaky right now. They lost player Jalen Watson, a starter who was off to a good start, lost into a season-ending injury. They're having trouble at the second cornerback position right now. Trent McDuffie, however, playing at an all-pro level at the number 1 corner. So listen. I think they're kind of above average at all positions on defense, except for cornerback 2. That's been an issue for them.
And with this defense is going up against an offense that has kind of struggled, and that's putting it quite generously this year. Up until this point, they found, with Bryce Young as quarterback, they found ways to manage their way into wins, particularly these past 2 weeks. Bryce Young was named the starter for this week on Monday, as Dave Canales announced to reporters on Monday. I think Bryce Young is probably, for the casual NFL fan, is probably the easiest access point to the Panthers because Dave Canales is a first-year head coach. Not many people know about him. Chuba Hubbard, as great as he's been in the backfield this year, he was still a fourth-round pick several years ago. Bryce Young is the overall number one pick of 2023. Played at Alabama. Everyone sort of seems to know who he is. What is your general impression of Bryce Young, and what's your general impression of the offense that Bryce Young commands?
We got to know Bryce Young a little bit here in Kansas City because that draft was here a couple of years ago. And I can remember going out to the high school stadium where the invited drafted players were putting on a clinic and made available to the media. And Bryce, it was pretty widely known he was going to be the number one pick. So he was kind of the center of attention guy. And I thought he handled all that really well. But standing next to him, I was just struck by this guy. Is this going to work? Listen, it would have been of great benefit to him to have come into a situation where almost Patrick Mahomes like where he could redshirt a year, right? And Patrick Mahomes had the great advantage of having Alex Smith in the program, and Mahomes didn't start a game until the season finale in 2018. In 2017, got to develop. Got to learn how to be an NFL starting quarterback, not only on the field, but off the field, handling interviews and the media, things like that. It was great. Well, that doesn't happen anymore, right? Certainly not for overall number ones and guys that are in the top 10 or 15 that are quarterbacks taken there. So it's been difficult for him, different coaches, different systems. And he's maybe need a little, at least from my perspective, a little more time to develop as an NFL quarterback. But you're right. I've been impressed with him the last couple of games, and really with Chuba Hubbard as well. We saw him a lot in college. Played at Oklahoma State, so we got to see a lot of him out here. He had that tremendous. It was junior year, I think, when he rushed for over 2,000 yards for the Cowboys. But this is a look. With Bryce Young and the Panthers shown some signs of life here. Did not pack it in after the terrible start. Riding a 2-game winning streak. I mean, they've won more games in the last couple of weeks than the Chiefs have. I'm curious to see how they're going to try to attack the Chiefs. I will say this about what the Chiefs do defensively: they are really good against the run, and they've done a very nice job against opponents' top running back. The Derrick Henrys they've really done a nice job in focusing and shutting that down. So that's one of the things that I definitely will be on the alert for on Sunday.
Well, Blair, let's end there. The Chiefs opened as an 11.5 point favorites on the road in Charlotte. In your estimation, and I know you're a sports writer, so you're great at drawing intrigue and drawing engagement ahead of this game, but the sportsbook said it's going to be quite a lopsided affair. In your estimation, is there any path to a Panthers victory?
I don't know about a victory. I absolutely think there's a path to making it a fourth quarter game and keeping it down. The Chiefs just don't, they don't blow teams out. They just don't. I mean, they've won 4 games this year on the final snap of the game. Now, of course, a lot of those against good opponents, teams that would be in the playoffs if the season ended today, type of opponents, right? The Ravens, the Broncos are a couple that come to mind. They just don't seem to handle, good fortune well. They'll get the ball with the lead in the second half and then kick it away, or they cannot seem to get a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter against any team, much less a poor team. So team with a poor record, I should say. So I think this is, I don't think the Chiefs are going to feel comfortable in this game. I certainly wouldn't pick them to lose. But, it's the NFL. Goofy things can happen. I don't think it was to the Panthers' benefit that the Chiefs lost last week. I think they're going to get a focused team team with a little bit of an edge. Not very happy with the way things unfolded for them, especially with Josh Allen running it down their throats in the fourth quarter like he did. So they will get a motivated Chiefs team on Sunday.
Well, it will be exciting. Blair Kerkhoff of the Kansas City Star, thank you so much for bringing your expertise here on Processing Blue Podcast, and I'll see you in the press box on Sunday.
Yeah, sounds good, Alex. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Mike Kaye and myself and guest Blair Kerkhoff and our wonderful producer, Zach Dennis. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to CharlotteObserver.com for all of your Panthers needs. Stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.
That's a wrap, Zach.